Hello everybody, this is ManuS and welcome to the next part of the artifact set review. Today it's time to look at the green spells. Let's go. Okay, so first off we have Juke. In Constructed, this is pretty unplayable. This is a strictly worse version of Cunning Plan. It doesn't draw your card and it only works on allies. In Limited, for similar reasons, I feel like this is probably not good. I'm fairly sure it is bad, but I'm not 100% sure how bad it is. Maybe you can sometimes play it as a filler, as a one-off. The problem is, it is a significantly worse Cunning Plan in a color that also needs the effect much less. Blue needs this a lot to protect its heroes. And even in like red or black, it would be helpful to set up kills. And green is kind of the color that is neither good at killing nor fragile enough that it needs a lot of protection. So this seems particularly wasteful here, while blue needs this in the early turns to keep their heroes from dying when they get mismatches on the flop. Next we have Stars Align. This card is actually pretty powerful for people coming from other card games, especially Magic the Gathering. Know this card as Dark Ritual, and it is one of the more powerful and broken cards in Magic that has been banned in a lot of formats throughout history. Here this seems to be a little less broken and more in control. In Limited, I think this is only playable if you have a bunch of powerful payoffs to accelerate into cards that generate card advantage, or so much board advantage that they make up for the loss in cards. Like for example the green 8-drops like Thunderhide, Pack, or Emissary of the Quorum, for example, or say ramping out a turn 4 Pearl Soothsayer in blue-green and stuff like that, or in green-red a Time of Triumph, just like the power plays that really reward you for throwing away a card effectively, but getting a lot of power in return much earlier. So yeah, in Limited, if you have enough top end, this is great. In Constructed, this seems like potentially more powerful because you can build around it. We will have to see how much it does in Constructed. I think right now it's not being played as much, but that might very well be a mistake because the card's effect is very powerful. Have Bellow, another marginal card. Seems fine as like a one-off filler in Limited. Being able to deal with a creep for 2 mana is decent. It's basically a poor man's Slay, but with green that doesn't have any removal, this is as good as it gets, and you might be able to turn around a lane or a fight with this. So if you have slots to spare and looking for cards, I wouldn't mind putting one of these into a lot of my decks, especially the non-green-black decks that don't have access to Slay. In Constructed, this is not even worth talking about. Next we have Defend the Weak, another card that I think is not remotely relevant to Constructed, but in Limited it's actually quite good. It basically gives the unit the continuous effect of Treant. And yeah, we all know Treant is a pretty good hero, partially due to its ability. The 2 melee creeps on the side of this will make it, this will make the melee creeps on the side of it pretty unkillable by opposing small creeps, especially melee creeps, and therefore push in the lane heavily. And it is pretty cheap and flexible. It's not super strong and not a super high pick, and it doesn't always make the cut in the deck, but I'm not sad to have one in my deck usually in Limited at all. Next we have Iron Branch Protection. That's a much worse one again. It's basically a poor combo trick. It's like a slightly better defensive stance. You give a unit in any lane 3 armor until end of its next combat phase, so it's basically just the same as defensive stance, except that you can use it from one lane on any other lane, making it a bit better, so you can use the mana in like one of your green lanes early on to protect another lane, even a non-green lane, which is nice. Like for example, if you have a green hero in the first lane and a non-green hero in the second that is dying due to a poor flop placement, you can use this to save them, where you couldn't with other green cards a lot of the time, or like with other cards in other colors. But yeah, not great, not much better than defensive stance, Would not be happy to have one in my draft deck, but could see playing one as a filler if I absolutely have to. I almost never end up with this in my deck, and in Constructed it's not worth talking about. Next we have Avernus Blessing, another non-starter in Constructed, but in Limited this is fine. I think it's even better than it looks than I initially thought, because this is basically a more flexible combat training. Sure, combat training is in a more aggressive color where it can tip hero fights much better, but this is in a color where there is a bunch of heroes that make your creeps very durable, namely Treant Protector, Farven, and Enchantress, and putting this on a creep next to them makes the creep kind of a 4/4, almost unkillable by like basic creeps, making it just maul through the opposing melee creeps and hitting the tower and pushing in the lane nicely and generating a board advantage, which is quite nice. And of course you can always use it to win hero fights, like green on green hero fights usually go 3 turns and end in a trade. If you use this on turn 1 or turn 2 without help from the opponent, this will win you the fight the next turn without your hero dying, for example. And there's obviously the second color that this might even affect better and so on. So it is a decent filler in Limited. I can even see ending up with more than one sometimes if I don't have that many cards to fill out my deck, because it is not the strongest card, but it is a reasonably flexible and decent card, I think. But yeah, nothing to be excited about. Next we have Ramask's Blessing. Ramask's Blessing is one of the powerhouses in Limited in green, I would say. Giving permanently +3 health to all units in one lane is super strong, makes the lane super durable, push in nicely. The fact that it can be played cross lane makes it even more flexible and powerful. Not sure if this has much of a place in Constructed, but it is possible because the effect is permanent, flexible, and pretty strong for the cost. So something to at least consider messing around when building decks in Constructed potentially, but might be a bit too generic for what Constructed decks usually want to do. Next we have Arm the Rebellion, another potential staple in Limited depending on what archetype. Basically, if you are in blue-green, this is a staple of your deck. This goes really well with Dimensional Portals, Calder Reserves, Prelex, Venomancer, their signature cards, Kana's signature card, and so on. This is just what makes the green-blue archetype tick in Limited. Really powerful. Outside of it, it's just a fine card. Nothing that exciting, because you usually don't have the mass of creeps, especially that fast, that this is gonna be as strong. But it's still a very solid card, usually, especially if you have a whole bunch of like creeps and not so many spells, even without like multi-creep generation and other colors. In Constructed, there's probably stronger pump effects with Mist of Avernus and Emissary of the Quorum that this probably will usually not make the cut, but power level wise it is there, so it's not something to completely ignore for Constructed, but it will usually probably end up not seeing play due to the better options and only wanting so many cards of this type of effect. Next we have called Unprepared. This card's pretty bad. In Constructed this is not even remotely a consideration, and even in Limited it is pretty bad. I would not be happy to put this in my deck. It is super situational and super risky. As soon as the opponent has an item, this doesn't do anything anymore, and every time they have an item card in their hand and you don't know if it's a potion or an item, basically can't use this. So I would stay away from playing this. Sure, it can be nice if they don't have an item for a few turns, and it can be super powerful then, but it's pretty high variance and unreliable, and that's usually not what you want. The game already has variance effects inherently that you need to try and manage, so you don't really want to add to those if you don't have to, and the payoff isn't reliable and big enough. We have Cleansing Rite, another card that I think is pretty bad. Like in Constructed, this is also completely irrelevant, and even in Limited, this is way too expensive and bad. This is basically the signature card of Abaddon without the armor and the retaliate for twice the cost. Sure, it is a unique effect, but that's about all it does, and the unique effect is also not that powerful and flexible that you even care. Next we have Defensive Bloom. The people seem to be a bit divided on this card. Some people think it's really bad and pretty much unplayable, and others think it's pretty good, like Life Coach apparently seems to really like the card and think it's very good. Sivka, for example, yeah, likes it about as much as I currently do, I would say, which is not very much, basically just tries to avoid playing it. I tried to play it a couple times, and every time I try, I usually end up cutting it because I have more better cards, because I just don't think the card is worth it, unless you have, like, I don't know, Draw Ranger and a bunch of other payoff. If you have, like, all the pump stuff, like Arm the Rebellions, and so on, then this becomes definitely better, and if you have slots left, I can totally see this as a filler, also alongside Enchantresses, Farvens, or Treant Protectors. This can be pretty annoying because it holds off stuff for a very long time, bogging down a lane, but you're still like kind of investing a card on just like defensive stuff that doesn't do anything when defending is not that relevant anymore. So I'm not super happy about it, but I'm still not quite sure how much I like or dislike the card. I'm pretty sure it's not a great card, and it's probably also not a horrible card, but it is somewhere in the middle of like okay to not good enough. I'll be experimenting more with it, and in Constructed we really don't need to talk about a card like this, I think. Next we have Restoration Effort. Yeah, this card's pretty bad. Sure, it's a pretty unique effect, healing your tower for 8. The only other card that can do that is Rejuvenator, but yeah, Rejuvenator is actually a good card, and healing yourself, investing a card in that, is about as bad in this game, or even worse than in about every other game, so yeah. Typical skill tester, don't play life gain stuff if it's not attached to something else. That is good, and this is not. So this is one of the worst green cards. Next we have Soul of Spring. This card is super powerful in my experience. It basically makes it so that the hero and its allied neighbors are completely unkillable and even heal back up when you manage to damage them. In a heavy green deck especially, if you have like 3 green heroes, this is a powerhouse. Regeneration 4 is so much, and that to like 3 units is incredible. And if they just kind of like won their fights against their enemy neighbors, they just heal back up to full thanks to the regeneration, making it super obnoxious. This is a very high pick in Limited, if you ask me, especially because of the rare, so you don't see it that easy and that often. So if you see it, snatch it up. I really like the card, been pretty impressed with it. Probably not what you want to be doing in Constructed with green, so I don't think it's going to make it into Constructed, even though the effect is pretty powerful. But it's more like a generic kind of value thing that works really well in Draft. Next we have Steel Strength. This is a pretty good trick in green that can quickly end up turning into a 2-for-1, generating card advantage. Tricks that can do that are always strong. Make sure to use it properly, find the right things to cripple and the right things to pump, and also be careful with the timing. Use this as late as possible so you get maximum value out of it and the opponent can't counterplay it as well. So yeah, fairly high pick in Limited. Pretty happy to have this or multiples in my deck usually. Makes combat for the opponent a pain. In Constructed, I kind of doubt this is what Constructed green is going to be about, but I could be wrong. I mean, the effect is pretty strong and swingy, so if there is a green deck that cares about this type of card, this is definitely a good one to consider. Next we have Corrosive Mist. It condemns all equipments in the lane for 5. Problem is, you usually have heroes with equipment in that lane as well, making this pretty situational and a two-edged kind of sword, and also, yeah, very situational in terms of its impact. Sometimes it can kill 1 or 2 heroes because it kills their health items and they die, and Other times it just sits in your hand, does nothing, or even would kill your own stuff. So yeah, not even sure if you want this as a filler in Limited, but feel free to mess around with it. I didn't get the chance yet, but I'm not a big fan in theory of this card. And in Constructed, I kinda doubt this is what you want. This is basically a sideboard card in a game without sideboard. So yeah, don't see this making it. Sure, you can run like sideboard type cards as one-offs, but every time you're gonna draw this, I think most of the time you will just be happy if it was anything else. Next we have Divine Intervention, another card that I think is mainly relevant to Limited. It gives allies damage immunity this round, basically the small brother of the signature card of Shen, so basically no heal up but also immunity. This is a nice trick, can also generate you some solid card advantage, be pretty obnoxious and swingy. A well-timed Divine Intervention can completely swing a lane, especially in the most contested lane where there's a lot of material lying around in terms of heroes and creeps. It can be a bit clunky and a bit situational in my experience, but especially when the game is not going this well, this card really shines. When you're just winning and the card is not particularly relevant because you're crushing the lanes, it's not a big deal because you're winning anyway. That's like the thing, cards that are better when you're already winning are not what you want, but cards that are particularly good when you're not winning and fine when you're winning are pretty good cards, because that's the situations where you need the most help. When you're winning, having a marginal card in your hand is usually not that big of a deal. And when you're losing, it's everything. Next we have Intimidation, another pretty solid versatile green card, basically another green removal. The only kind of removal green gets, really, of like hero or creep control. This is pretty nice. First of all, it lets you get heroes out of the way. If you're lucky, they even land in a lane that is already won or doesn't matter. Keep in mind you can also use that on your own stuff. I've used that a bunch of times on my own heroes to get them out of a lane that I already won and into one of the other two lanes to have impact there. You can do the same with creeps, and you can do the same with Bellow on your own creeps. So this is pretty nice. Once again, this card is not particularly relevant and Constructed. It's expensive, it's a bit uncontrollable, and you usually have better options in the second color to control opposing creeps and heroes. Next we have Curse of Atrophy. This is probably a slightly better routed, but still pretty bad. You modify enemy heroes with -2 attack in the lane. First of all, that requires them to have 2 or 3 heroes in the lane, and even then you just get like a double or triple crippling blow, or less cards and less cost. But even if you hit like 2 heroes with this, more often than not, it will not be that relevant. And where's the investment of a card? It's pretty situational, it's pretty expensive. I am not a fan. I have never wanted to put this in my Limited decks, and in Constructed this is not even a consideration. And last but not least, we have Divine Purpose, a much worse Divine Intervention. First of all, it costs 2 more. Second of all, it only affects 1 unit. Sure, it makes them unkillable by damage because it makes them permanently immune to damage, but yeah, this is not powerful enough for what it does, so I would just stay away from it. I don't see this ever making it into any Constructed deck, and even in Limited I usually do not like this and don't want to play this. It's just too expensive, too situational, too low impact, just not worth it. 7 mana cards should be super powerful and swing the game, win you the lane or the game preferably, or push you way ahead, and this card just doesn't do that. Okay, that's it again for the artifact set review. This was the green spells. Tomorrow it's time to look at the blue spells, the spell heaviest color probably. Okay, if you enjoyed this, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notification icon, hit the like button, let me know in the comments what you think, and discuss some of the card opinions. You can also find me on social media over here and live streaming on Twitch. if you want to check that out. And yeah, one last thing, if you want to support the free content and appreciate it, I would really appreciate it if you would consider whitelisting YouTube or just turning off your ad block when watching the videos. That would really help a lot. That's it again for today. This was the artifact set review with the green spells. I'm your host ManuS. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!